I've really been looking forward to unpacking this one today.
Oh, absolutely. Me too.
Because it touches on a choice that, well, every single one of us has to make at some point. And it's a choice that completely dictates the rhythm of our daily lives. So welcome to today's deep dive.
Glad to be here.
I'm really glad you are joining us today. Whether you are commuting right now, maybe avoiding your inbox for a few minutes, or just harboring an intense curiosity about the mechanics of modern living, you are in the exact right place.
You definitely are.
We have a really fantastic mission today. We are exploring a rather unique piece of source material that dissects the ultimate living dilemma.
The big one.
The urban city apartment versus the suburban house. And I want to speak directly to you, the listener, right now. No matter who you are, what your technical expertise is, or what you do for a living, you live somewhere.
Everyone does.
Right. You have a physical space you call home. And because of that, you undoubtedly have aspects of that space that you absolutely cherish.
And aspects that probably make you want to pull your hair out.
Exactly. This deep dive is designed to be a sort of shortcut to understanding the psychological, economic, and practical trade-offs of these different environments.
It's a great breakdown.
It really is. Now, the material we are pulling from today is actually an advanced C2 level English listening practice discussion. It features a dialogue between two speakers, originally named Emma and John, who are ostensibly debating this topic to, demonstrate vocabulary and context.
Right, it's a linguistic tool.
But if you look past that linguistic exercise, the actual substance of their conversation is an incredibly rich, relatable, and honestly surprisingly profound breakdown of how we live today.
It really is a brilliant piece of audio to analyze. What becomes apparent very quickly is that these two speakers aren't just rattling off a basic list of real estate pros and cons.
No, not at all.
They are unwittingly outlining a deep sociological framework. We are looking at how our living spaces actively dictate our behavioral patterns.
Oh, heavily.
How they completely restructure our financial realities. And, perhaps most crucially, how they impact our mental health and our stress levels on a day-to-day basis.
Which is so important.
It is. The physical space you inhabit doesn't just hold your belongings, it actively filters your interaction with the outside world.
Okay, let's unpack this because there is just a massive amount of territory to cover here.
Let's dive in.
Let's start right in the thick of it, right in the concrete jungle. We are talking about the urban city apartment.
The classic starting point.
Right. The dialogue kicks off with the most universal argument for choosing a city apartment, which is the geography of convenience.
Location, location, location.
It's the classic real estate mantra. The source highlights that apartments are usually situated right inside or immediately adjacent to the city center. And the direct result of that geographical positioning is that everything you could possibly need is nearby.
Yes, and I think it's worth examining what nearby actually entails in this specific context.
What do you mean?
Well, the discussion specifically lists shops, restaurants, public transit, and hospitals. These aren't just casual, nice-to-have amenities.
Right, they're essentials.
Exactly. These are the core pillars of daily human infrastructure. When you live in a central apartment, your access to these pillars is practically immediate. You aren't scheduling a trip to the hospital or the grocery store.
You don't have to plan it out.
No, you are merely stepping into your extended neighborhood.
That immediacy is what really strikes me. The source brings up this incredibly vivid example in the audio of having a literal 5-minute walk to the supermarket.
5 minutes.
5 minutes. Think about how fundamentally that changes your entire approach to the day.
It changes everything.
It does. You don't have to sit down on a Sunday afternoon and plan your meals for the entire week. You don't have to load up the trunk of a car, navigate through terrible traffic, hunt for a parking spot in some massive asphalt lot, and then haul everything back home.
You just walk for 5 minutes whenever the mood strikes.
Exactly. And even better, they discuss the ultimate late-night convenience metric.
Ah, the pizza test.
The pizza test. Wanting a pizza at 9 o'clock at night. In the city apartment scenario, you can literally walk out your front door and have 5 different pizza places to choose from.
All within a few blocks.
All on foot at 9 p.m.
What's fascinating here is the underlying concept of walkability.
Yeah.
And how it intrinsically ties in to the friction of our daily lives.
Friction, right.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, friction is the psychological and physical resistance we experience when we attempt to complete any given task.
Like getting dinner?
Precisely. Having to drive 30 minutes, find parking, and sit at countless traffic lights just to procure dinner. That is a high-friction environment.
It sounds exhausting just talking about it.
It requires executive function, planning, and energy. When the dialogue mentions that 5-minute walk to the supermarket or having 5 pizzerias available on foot at 9 p.m., it is describing a near-zero friction environment.
But isn't outsourcing all that effort actually a bit of a luxury? I mean, we frame it as basic convenience, but having the entire city act as your personal pantry is a very specific type of modern privilege.
It is a privilege, certainly, but it's also a structural trade-off.
How so?
Well, why does this low-friction state matter so much to the people who choose it? Because a low-friction daily routine frees up an immense amount of mental bandwidth and temporal capital.
Time, basically.
Exactly. You are effectively outsourcing your long-term food storage and your kitchen preparation to the commercial neighborhood around you.
That makes a lot of sense.
You don't need a massive freezer if the grocery store is essentially your pantry. You don't need a massive kitchen if the local restaurants serve as your dining room.
Outsourcing your kitchen to the neighborhood. I really like that framing. It perfectly sets up the economic angle they discuss next.
Because smaller spaces cost less.
Exactly. Because you are outsourcing that space, the apartment itself is fundamentally smaller, which leads to their point that apartments are generally more affordable than houses.
Right, they use that specific word, affordable.
They do, and they use it to indicate that the entry price aligns much better with a starting budget. The dialogue notes that for younger demographics, people who are, just launching their careers and independent lives, an apartment is the only logical entry point.
Buying a house at that stage is nearly impossible.
The source actually says trying to buy a house in a major city can literally make you want to cry.
I think a lot of people relate to that.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
The apartment is the accessible gateway to independence. So I want to pose a question to you, the listener, right now. Consider your own daily friction. Think about your morning routine, your commute, or your evening cravings.
The 9 p.m. pizza craving.
Right. How far do you have to travel for a basic necessity? Does your geographical environment make your life frictionless, or are you constantly fighting the distance of where you live?
That is the essential question of urban living, and it requires brutal honesty to answer. But, as the source brilliantly pivots to in the discussion, that highly desirable low-friction geography exacts a very steep toll in other areas.
The catch.
The catch. The convenience is subsidized by severe spatial realities. This brings us to the physical constraints of high-density living.
Right, because it's absolutely not a utopia of late-night pizza and easy grocery runs. We have to look at the major downsides of the city apartment.
The lack of space.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The dialogue focuses heavily on a very specific descriptive word here, contrasting it sharply with the concept of being spacious. That word is cramped.
Cramped.
And they don't just use it in passing. They build a whole picture around what a cramped existence really feels like on a daily basis. It means the space is fundamentally inadequate for the life trying to happen inside it.
And this is where the audio practice becomes highly evocative. They illustrate what cramped means in everyday practice. They move beyond the simple dictionary definition to the lived psychological experience.
It's an incredibly relatable picture they paint. They describe a living situation where the kitchen and the living room are, for all intents and purposes, the exact same room.
You're cooking and relaxing in the same spot.
You are sautéing onions in the same 3 square feet of airspace where you were supposedly trying to unwind and watch television.
Which is not ideal.
Not at all. And the bedroom description is just stark. The conversation highlights a bedroom so severely small that if you stand dead in the center and open your arms wide, you can practically touch both opposing walls.
You can just reach out and touch them.
Exactly. At one point, one of the speakers jokes that a room that size shouldn't even legally be called a bedroom. They say it's just a closet.
And the retort to that is brilliant.
It's so defensive. The response is, don't say that, it has a window. Which gives us this amazing, slightly tragic phrase from the source. It's a closet with a view.
A closet with a view perfectly encapsulates the grand urban compromise.
It really does.
You are voluntarily trading your private square footage for access to a desirable public zip code. You shrink your private footprint so your public footprint can expand.
That's a great way to put it.
But, as the dialogue quickly reveals, the physical constraint of the walls isn't even the most intrusive part of high-density living.
Oh no, not even close.
The real challenge is the acoustic reality of the apartment. This brings us to the universally recognized archetype.
The dinosaur neighbor.
The dinosaur neighbor.
Anyone who has ever lived in an apartment just felt a collective shiver go down their spine hearing that.
It's a universal trauma.
The discussion points out that every single evening, like absolute clockwork, the tenant below is subjected to this loud, rhythmic, heavy, dinosaur-like stomping from the ceiling above.
Thump, thump, thump.
Yes. But it's not just the ceiling that fails to protect you, it's the lateral walls, too. They note that the walls in these buildings can be so paper thin that you hear absolutely everything transpiring in the adjacent unit.
Everything.
You hear their television shows, you hear their intimate phone calls, and you hear their heated arguments. In fact, the source makes a point that the tenant sometimes knows more about the neighbor's relationship dynamic than the neighbors do themselves.
You become a captive audience.
You are the involuntary recipient of a massive amount of personal data you never, ever asked for.
What's fascinating here is the sociological and psychological phenomenon of involuntary intimacy.
Involuntary intimacy, that's a heavy concept.
It is. In high-density apartment architecture, your sensory boundaries are completely porous. The walls provide a visual barrier, but they fail completely as an auditory barrier.
Right, you can't see them, but they're right there.
Because of this, you are intimately tethered to the biological routines, the emotional moods, and the interpersonal conflicts of absolute strangers.
It's wild when you frame it like that.
The source dialogue attempts to frame this with a bit of dark humor, referring to the neighbors' arguments as free entertainment.
Right, free entertainment.
But they immediately acknowledge the profound psychological toll this exacts. When you cannot control the auditory input in your own sanctuary, you are denied true rest.
You can't ever truly turn off.
Exactly. It leads to a very specific, chronic kind of mental exhaustion. You are constantly on high alert in your own home.
I think mental exhaustion is putting it mildly. The audio gives us this deeply poignant image of the tenant sitting inside their own home, physically placing headphones over their ears.
Not to listen to music.
Right. Not to listen to a podcast, not for music, but specifically to hear what they call sweet, beautiful nothing.
Sweet, beautiful nothing.
They are using modern technology to simulate the basic silence that the physical structure of the apartment cannot provide.
That phrase, sweet, beautiful nothing, is incredibly revealing. It completely reframes silence. Silence is no longer just the absence of noise.
What does it become?
It becomes a highly valuable, almost luxurious commodity.
Yeah.
It's an asset that the city apartment effectively bankrupts. You have to manufacture your own sensory deprivation just to reach a baseline of calm.
That sounds exhausting.
It is. And this lack of control over your sensory environment transitions perfectly into another major theme of their discussion.
The lack of control over the physical environment itself.
Precisely. Which is entirely defined by the tenant-landlord dynamic.
Oh, this dynamic is such a massive, complicated piece of the apartment puzzle. Let's delve into this concept of being a tenant and dealing with a landlord, because the speakers spend a lot of time wrestling with it.
It's the core relationship of renting.
Initially, the conversation frames this power dynamic as a massive check in the pro column for apartment living.
The huge appeal of renting.
Right. The appeal is that you, the tenant, do not have to worry about catastrophic, expensive repairs. If the roof starts leaking rainwater onto your couch, if the central heating completely dies in the middle of December, or if the internal plumbing bursts.
It's simply not your problem.
It is strictly the landlord's problem. The dialogue points out that you simply pick up your phone, call the landlord, and say, please fix this, not my problem. You are entirely shielded from the financial ruin of sudden structural failures.
That is certainly the theoretical ideal of the rental contract. You are paying a premium every month to outsource maintenance and catastrophic risk.
You're buying peace of mind.
You buy peace of mind. However, the dialogue provides a stark, sobering contrast to this ideal. They introduce a harrowing scenario of what actually happens when this power dynamic breaks down.
And break down, it absolutely does. They detail this absolute nightmare of a situation to prove a point. The hot water in the tenant's entire apartment stops working completely.
Just completely gone.
We aren't talking about lukewarm water, we are talking zero hot water. So, following the theoretical rules of the arrangement, the tenant calls the landlord.
As they should.
The landlord assures them, don't worry, I'll send someone out on Monday. Now, having to wait until Monday isn't ideal.
No, it's frustrating.
But it's part of the deal, so the tenant accepts it. Monday arrives, the sun sets, and nobody shows up.
Of course not.
The tenant calls the landlord back, and the landlord casually says, okay, tomorrow for sure.
But tomorrow never comes.
Exactly. Tomorrow turns into Wednesday, Wednesday turns into Thursday, and eventually it's Friday. The tenant ends up going 5 full days with absolutely no hot water.
This narrative completely shatters the illusion of the not my problem defense.
It shatters it entirely.
Because while the financial cost of the plumbing repair might legally and technically belong to the landlord, the lived physical reality of the broken amenity falls entirely on the shoulders of the tenant.
Yes.
The landlord isn't the one shivering in a cold apartment. The tenant is.
Exactly. But wait, let me play devil's advocate here for a second. Even with the 5-day wait, isn't that still better than the tenant having to suddenly find $2,000 to replace a water heater themselves?
From a purely financial standpoint, yes.
The sheer misery they describe is awful, yes. The dialogue explains that on day 1, the tenant just bravely took a freezing cold shower, but as the days dragged on and the reality set in, the tenant was reduced to literally boiling water in a large pot on the stove just to wash their face and body.
Like a pioneer.
The speakers actually joke about that. They say the tenant felt like they were living 100 years in the past, like it's 1920. Think about the absurdity of that.
It is highly absurd.
You are paying a premium to live in this highly modernized, walkable urban center where you can get a pizza delivered in 10 minutes. But inside the walls of your apartment, you are boiling water in a metal pot like it's 100 years ago because you are completely, utterly at the mercy of a slow landlord.
It is absurd, but it highlights the fundamental trade-off of renting that answers your question. Yes, you save the $2,000, but you trade personal agency and control for that theoretical convenience.
Agency is the key word there.
When you are a tenant, your quality of life is tethered entirely to the competence, the urgency, and the empathy of another human being who does not live in your space.
That's a scary thought.
If your landlord is highly responsive, your life is indeed easy and frictionless. If they are slow, apathetic, or cheap, you are instantly thrust backward a century in your basic living standards.
You're just stuck.
You cannot simply hire your own plumber and fix it that afternoon without violating your lease or eating the cost yourself. You are trapped in a waiting game.
A miserable waiting game.
And this lack of fundamental agency isn't just limited to emergency repairs. The dialogue brilliantly points out that it extends to the very aesthetics of the space.
Yes, the aesthetic confinement. This part of the discussion resonated so deeply with me. They bring up this incredibly telling anecdote about the tenant simply wanting to paint one single wall in the apartment blue.
Just one wall?
Just an accent wall. Just a tiny splash of color to break up the monotony and inject a tiny bit of their own personality into the room.
A very reasonable request.
But because of the rental agreement, they had to formally request permission from the landlord. And the landlord flat out rejected it.
Denied.
The mandate was strict, keep it white. The tenant in the dialogue describes the psychological effect of this forced sterility, stating that because the entire apartment is painted this generic, unchangeable white, it feels like living inside a refrigerator.
A refrigerator. That's a bleak image.
It's just a boring, cold, uniform white box that you are expressly forbidden from altering.
It's a profound observation about human nature and the concept of home. Anthropologically, a home is meant to be a reflection of the self. It's a space we customize to feel secure and grounded. But in a rental apartment, the landlord's desire to protect their financial asset and ensure easy turnover completely supersedes the tenant's basic human need for self-expression and nesting.
So you're just a guest, really.
You are, quite literally, living inside someone else's investment vehicle. It is a sterile environment. A refrigerator paired with a closet bedroom.
What a combination.
This combination of aesthetic confinement, operational helplessness, and acoustic invasion is exactly the cocktail of frustrations that eventually drives people to look outward, away from the city center.
Which brings us to the Great Migration. The dialogue shifts gears entirely here, moving our deep dive away from the dense city and out into the suburbs.
A completely different world.
Now, the speakers are careful to define what they mean by the suburbs in this context. They describe them as the much quieter residential areas spreading out around a city, occupying that transitional zone somewhere between the chaotic, busy center and the completely rural, isolated countryside.
The middle ground.
And the primary allure of this zone, the massive gravitational pull for the frustrated apartment dweller, is the exact opposite of our earlier vocabulary word. They are chasing the word spacious.
Space is the ultimate suburban currency.
It really is.
It is what you are buying when you leave the city. The dialogue paints a highly idealized picture of a house that finally resolves all the spatial traumas of the apartment.
It sounds so appealing after the refrigerator story.
It does. It describes a home that includes a dedicated living room and a completely separate kitchen.
immediately resolving the cramped reality of cooking and relaxing in the same 3 square feet.
Exactly. It mentions having multiple bedrooms, and then it introduces the ultimate suburban prize.
The private garden.
The garden.
The garden is framed as the ultimate luxury. The conversation contrasts this so perfectly with the bleak reality of the apartment dweller whose only connection to the outdoors is looking out of that closet with a view window.
If they're lucky.
Right, they might not even have a tiny balcony. But the suburban house offers this expansive private plot of nature. The sensory details the speakers use to describe the garden are just idyllic.
Very descriptive.
They talk about the peace of summer mornings, taking your coffee outside, sitting in a chair, reading a book, feeling the warmth of the sun on your face, and breathing actual fresh air instead of inhaling exhaust fumes and listening to traffic noise.
It sounds like an absolute paradise.
Especially when you compare it to the trauma of listening to your neighbors scream at each other through paper-thin drywall.
Absolutely. And beyond just the physical expansion of space, the dialogue emphasizes the immense psychological liberation that comes with ownership.
The agency we talked about.
Yes, they directly contrast the forced sterility of the white refrigerator apartment with the absolute freedom of the house owner. In a house, you finally possess agency.
You do whatever you want.
You can knock down walls. You can paint the bedroom pitch black or neon pink if you desire.
Anything but refrigerator white.
Exactly. You can drive nails into the walls and put pictures up everywhere without fearing the loss of a security deposit. You are finally empowered to mold the physical space to match your internal identity, rather than shrinking your identity to fit the landlord's rules.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though, because as the source material quickly points out, that glorious freedom, that total agency, it comes with a massive, brutal, and often unexpected catch.
The catch is always there.
The conversation introduces the harsh reality of ownership, and the specific concept they focus on is maintenance. And they don't mince words here. Maintenance is described as essentially being a second job.
A second job. It is the complete and total reversal of the apartment dynamic we discussed earlier.
How so?
If the mantra of the apartment tenant was not my problem, the reality of the suburban house is absolutely everything is your problem.
Every single thing.
Maintenance, as explored in their discussion, is the relentless, never-ending physical and administrative labor required to keep a complex structure from decaying.
It is an exhausting list of responsibilities. The speakers detail the specific chores that now eat up all your weekends. Constantly fixing broken fixtures, weeding and cleaning that beautiful garden you wanted so badly, inspecting the roof for leaks, monitoring the plumbing.
It never ends.
And to drive the point home, they deliver this incredible, stressful horror story to perfectly illustrate the downside of this newfound agency. They talk about a homeowner who, just last month, experienced a major problem with the bathroom pipes bursting.
A homeowner's worst nightmare.
The speaker asks a series of rhetorical questions that really land the punch. Guess who had to pay for the emergency plumber? Me. Guess who had to frantically call around and organize the repair? Me.
Always me.
Guess who was literally down on their hands and knees, scrubbing and soaking up dirty water off the bathroom floor at 11 p.m. at night? Me.
Not the landlord.
No. You can't just casually call the landlord and go to sleep because, surprise, you are the landlord now. You are personally, legally, and financially responsible for every single drop of water that falls in that house.
This anecdote perfectly highlights the hidden compounding costs of property upkeep. Home ownership is a continuous, slow drip drain on both your temporal capital, your free time, and your financial capital.
Mostly the financial capital, it seems.
The dialogue captures this economic anxiety beautifully with a very evocative, highly memorable phrase.
Oh, I know the one you mean.
When one of the speakers asks how much money is actually spent on all this maintenance every single year, the homeowner completely refuses to give a specific dollar amount.
They just won't say it.
Instead, they deflect by stating that they have a beautiful, spacious house, but a very, very nervous bank account.
A nervous bank account. I think that is one of the best phrases in the entire source audio. It so perfectly humanizes the constant grinding stress of home ownership.
It's very relatable.
Your house might look incredibly peaceful and serene from the street with its lovely garden and painted walls, but internally, financially, you are in a state of perpetual vigilance.
Always waiting for the other shoe to drop.
You are always on edge, just waiting for the next pipe to burst or the next appliance to fail. But the compromises of the suburban dream don't just stop at the financial anxiety. The conversation shifts to address the psychological geography of the location itself.
Exactly. We have to address the geographical compromises of a house, which stand in stark contrast to the low-friction city center we started with.
Right, because you had to move away to get the space.
Moving to the suburbs inherently means moving away from the epicenter of convenience. The text notes specifically that this hypothetical suburban house is located about 30 minutes away by car or a daunting 45 minutes by bus from the city center.
But hold on, 30 minutes doesn't really sound all that bad in the grand scheme of things, does it? Millions of people commute much longer than that every single day.
It might not sound terrible for a single trip, a one-off commute, but you have to consider the cumulative friction it adds to every aspect of your lifestyle. It fundamentally alters your behavioral patterns.
So it adds up.
Let's revisit the ultimate metric of convenience they established earlier, the 9 p.m. pizza dilemma.
Right. The pizza test. In the city, you literally put on your shoes, walk downstairs, and have 5 options in 5 minutes. In the suburbs, the dialogue makes the harsh reality painfully clear. If you suddenly crave pizza at 9 p.m., you are entirely on your own.
No one is delivering it.
You have to make it yourself. Now, the suburban homeowner in the audio tries to bravely defend this lifestyle downgrade by boasting that their homemade pizza is amazing.
Trying to spin a negative into a positive.
But it completely misses the point of the convenience metric. Having to pull out flour, knead dough, wait for it to rise, and heat up an oven from scratch at 9 o'clock at night when you are exhausted is the exact opposite of a 5-minute frictionless walk.
It returns us directly to the concept of friction. The suburbs are, by design, a high-friction environment for any spontaneous external needs.
You trade spontaneity for space?
That's exactly it. But there is an even deeper, more profound psychological point the conversation raises regarding the geography of the suburbs, and that is the severe impact of seasonality.
Seasonality.
Specifically, what happens when winter arrives?
Yes, the winter isolation. The dialogue paints a really vivid, almost bleak picture of what happens to that suburban paradise when the green, sunny garden dies back.
It changes everything.
It points out that in the depths of winter, the sun goes down and it gets pitch dark at 4 p.m. It's freezing cold outside. And because you are a 30-minute drive from the city center, you are physically insulated from the warmth and energy of the crowd.
The speakers use the critical vocabulary word isolated here. They define isolated as the acute feeling of being completely alone, separated, and cut off from everything else.
It's a heavy feeling.
This is a vital psychological toll that often goes unmentioned in real estate brochures. When the days are incredibly short and the weather turns hostile, the peace and quiet of the suburbs, the very thing you bought the house for, can very quickly curdle into a feeling of confinement.
The silence becomes deafening.
The geographical buffer zone that protects you from the noise and chaos of the city now effectively traps you in a state of solitary confinement. You aren't just away from the noise, you are away from the life.
It's a really powerful point about how our environment dictates our mood. But to be fair to the suburbs, the dialogue does provide a strong counterpoint to this seasonal depression.
The silver lining.
The homeowner readily admits that the dark winter months make them feel incredibly isolated, but they counter that feeling with the absolute glorious redemption of spring.
Spring fixes everything.
The audio describes how, when spring finally arrives, the dormant garden explodes into life and becomes beautiful again. The sun comes out, the birds return, and the homeowner claims that in that moment, they instantly, completely forget all about the dark, miserable, isolating winter.
A convenient memory lapse.
It's like they suffer from a localized seasonal amnesia brought on entirely by blooming flowers and warm breezes.
Which is a profound testament to the deep biological power of nature and having private outdoor space. That connection to the changing of the seasons right in your own backyard is what sustains the suburban homeowner through the darker, high-friction months.
So, listener, I want you to genuinely reflect on this for a second. Think about your own personality wiring. What is your personal tolerance for isolation versus your psychological need for constant external stimulation?
This is important self-assessment.
Could you mentally handle the 4 p.m. winter darkness, the quiet, and the distance if it meant you were rewarded with a private, blooming garden in the spring? Or are you the type of person who needs the bright lights, the chaotic noise, the spontaneous pizza, and the sheer density of people in the city to keep your energy levels up year-round?
It is a delicate, highly individualized balance of personal needs. And crucially, these abstract personal needs eventually have to be weighed against the stark, uncompromising financial mechanics discussed in the source material.
The money part.
This brings us to the economics of the long game, the structural differences between buying and renting.
This is where the deep dive gets into the heavy, inescapable financial realities of adult life. The dialogue explores the massive, lumbering mechanism that powers the housing market.
The mortgage.
The mortgage. The speakers clearly lay out the definition for their audience. A mortgage is the process of borrowing a massive, life-altering sum of money from a bank to purchase a house or an apartment, and then locking yourself into a contract to pay that money back with interest every single month for a very, very long time.
And they specifically highlight the timeline.
20 to 30 years.
30 years. It is incredibly difficult to overstate the existential weight of a 30-year financial commitment.
It's half a lifetime.
When you sign a 30-year mortgage, you aren't just buying a building. You are making a bet on your future earning potential. That debt dictates your financial trajectory. It influences your career choices.
Because you can't easily quit a job when the bank is owed money every month.
Exactly. And it severely limits your geographic mobility for decades. It is a monumental, life-defining undertaking.
It really is staggering when you stop and think about the duration. In the audio, when one of the speakers hears the phrase 30 years, they are audibly shocked by the sheer length of that timeline.
It's a shock to the system.
But then the conversation pivots and brilliantly contrasts that heavy, anxiety-inducing 30-year burden with the only real alternative, which is the renting trap.
The alternative timeline.
The dialogue points out that while 30 years feels like an eternity to pay off a debt, there is a financial timeline that lasts even longer. Paying rent forever and owning absolutely nothing when it's all over.
The forever payment.
They use this incredible, painful metaphor to describe the rental reality. They describe paying rent as taking your hard-earned money every single month and just throwing money out the window of your cramped apartment.
Just tossing it out.
The money just catches the breeze and disappears forever into the landlord's pocket. Whereas with a mortgage, yes, it is wildly expensive, you have a nervous bank account, and the maintenance is stressful, but after those 30 years of grinding, the house is definitively, legally yours. You own an asset.
It is the classic economic debate of building equity versus maintaining liquidity.
Right.
Renting provides unparalleled flexibility. You can move easily, and it frees you entirely from the maintenance burden and the catastrophic risk, but it builds zero personal wealth.
Not at all.
However, the dialogue is very careful not to present buying a house as a pure, flawless financial victory. It introduces a massive caveat, what we might call the renovation trap.
Oh, the renovation trap is easily the scariest part of the home buying process. The speakers bring up this terrifying, all too common reality where a house looks perfectly nice and charming on the outside. But once you sign the mortgage and get the keys, you realize the inside requires a massive, ruinous amount of work.
It's always more work than you think.
They define the concept of renovating as the grueling process of fixing up and modernizing a home, tearing out old carpets to put in new floors, completely gutting and replacing an outdated kitchen, smashing tiles for a new bathroom, or literally tearing down interior walls to change the layout.
And the brutal reality is that this massive construction project requires significant liquid capital on top of the massive mortgage debt you just secured.
Cash you probably don't have.
Many naive buyers discover, to their horror, that they need to spend tens of thousands of dollars more just to make the newly purchased house functionally livable or aesthetically modern.
The conversation gives us this incredibly evocative, heartbreaking image of the renovation reality. They say you buy a house, you get the keys, and you are blissfully happy for exactly one day.
One single day of joy.
And then on day 2, you stand in the middle of the outdated kitchen, you look at the peeling cabinets and the ugly floors, and you just cry.
You realize what you've done.
You literally cry because the sheer magnitude of the money required and the months of stressful, dusty construction work that is about to consume your life suddenly hits you.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the dialogue is masterfully highlighting the extreme emotional volatility inherent in homeownership.
Emotional volatility is right.
The soaring joy of acquisition and agency is almost immediately followed by the crushing, exhausting reality of execution. However, to balance the narrative, the text does offer the ultimate payoff for enduring this stress.
The light at the end of the tunnel.
When the renovation is finally agonizingly complete, the resulting house is completely, absolutely personalized. Every single detail, from the color of the hardwood floors to the specific handles on the kitchen cabinets, is a manifestation of your specific choice.
Total control.
You have successfully transitioned from the sterile confinement of the white refrigerator to a bespoke environment tailored exclusively to your existence and your taste.
It is the ultimate hard-won prize for surviving the nervous bank account, the leaking pipes, and the crying fists in the kitchen.
It is.
And analyzing this trade-off brings us to a really crucial realization in the source material. The speakers conclude that the idea of a single best option, declaring either the city apartment or the suburban house as the undisputed winner, is a myth.
There is no universal winner.
There is no universal truth here. The right choice is entirely dependent on your specific stage in life. For example, the dialogue notes a very common, almost predictable sociological migration pattern.
The circle of life in real estate.
Exactly. A large percentage of families start their adult lives in small city apartments when they are young, single, or just married. But then, almost inevitably, they migrate to houses in the suburbs when they have children.
It's a very common trajectory.
Why? Because the physics of children demand it. Kids need physical space to play, to run around, and to expend energy. And the conversation makes a brilliant, funny callback here. If you try to confine two energetic kids inside a cramped, thin-walled city apartment, the noise level becomes incredible.
You become the problem.
Suddenly, your family has become the dreaded, noisy dinosaur neighbors to everyone else in the building.
It's a wonderful, empathetic point about how our physical space requirements constantly expand and contract based on our biological milestones and our changing social structures.
We outgrow our spaces.
To avoid becoming the acoustic nuisance of the building, families are forced to migrate to environments that possess the square footage to absorb their kinetic energy and noise. And in discussing this inevitable migration, the dialogue introduces a fascinating geographical compromise that attempts to bridge the gap.
Yes, the search for the middle ground. They define this transitional area as the outskirts.
The outskirts.
The outskirts are described geographically as the very edge of the city, right at the boundary line where the dense city limits finally meet the open countryside. It's not the bustling, chaotic center where you hear sirens all night, but it's also not the faraway, isolated, dark at 4 p.m. deep suburbs either.
It sits right on the border.
The appeal of the outskirts is that you manage to capture some of that much-needed space. Maybe you get a modest yard for the kids to run in, but you remain functionally connected to the city's infrastructure and energy. It's framed in the discussion as a very smart, calculated compromise for those who simply cannot choose between the two extremes.
The outskirts represent the physical manifestation of compromise. You might trade the absolute frictionless 5-minute pizza walk for perhaps a 15-minute drive. But in exchange, you gain just enough square footage and acoustic buffering to prevent your family from becoming the dreaded dinosaurs of a shared building.
Right.
You're trying to thread the needle between convenience and agency.
Now, since our source material is fundamentally designed as an advanced English learning tool, the speakers wrap up their conversation by providing some incredibly practical, real-world linguistic takeaways for their audience.
The vocabulary application.
Yes, these are specific phrases designed to help someone describe their home, and they beautifully encapsulate the entire philosophical debate we've just had. I am really excited to highlight these because they serve as perfect, bite-sized summaries of these massive lifestyle choices.
They're excellent examples of distilling highly complex living situations and emotional trade-offs into very efficient conversational sentences.
Exactly. For example, if you want to focus on the positive vibe of a small, potentially cramped space, the dialogue offers the phrase, "My apartment is small but cozy."
Cozy is a great word.
Cozy is such a fantastic, warm counterword to the anxiety of cramped. It reframes the limitation as an asset. On the flip side, if you are feeling the heavy burden of ownership, you can use the phrase they provide. "My house is spacious, but it needs a lot of maintenance."
A very realistic sentence.
That single sentence captures both the dream and the nightmare of the suburbs. The dialogue also equips you to express what you love, like the phrase, "I love my apartment because it's close to everything."
Highlighting the friction.
And importantly, it provides the vocabulary to vent your frustrations, teaching listeners to say, "My apartment is too cramped," or the ultimate universal pennant complaint.
My landlord never fixes anything. These phrases act as the grammatical armor needed to navigate social conversations about real estate and lifestyle. They allow individuals to clearly and naturally articulate their specific balance of compromises without having to launch into a deep philosophical explanation of friction and agency.
It's highly practical, And at the very end of their practice module, the speakers reveal their own ultimate ideal living preferences, which I think perfectly summarize the two deeply entrenched sides of this human debate.
What did they decide?
Well, one of the speakers dreams of a spacious house out in the suburbs, complete with a big, beautiful garden for those spring mornings. But they add a caveat. They want it to be close enough to the city to easily access restaurants, while remaining far enough away to guarantee peace and quiet.
Essentially, they're dreaming of the impossible utopian perfection of the outskirts.
The impossible dream. The other speaker, however, has a completely different vision of paradise. They want a modern, highly spacious apartment located on a very high floor so they can look down and see the entire city spread out below them.
A penthouse vibe.
But their number one, absolute biggest non-negotiable requirement for this dream apartment. They explicitly demand thick walls and 0 dinosaur neighbors.
It perfectly encapsulates the enduring, perhaps impossible human desire to have it all.
We want everything.
We want the low friction, convenience, and energy of the city without the involuntary intimacy and noise, or we want the expansive space and agency of the suburbs without the maintenance burden and the absolute seasonal isolation.
So what does this all mean for us? As we wrap up this massive deep dive into a simple English dialogue, we can see clearly that whether you prefer the low-friction, walkable convenience and the occasional stomping dinosaur neighbor of a city apartment, or you crave the spacious, garden-filled, maintenance-heavy, nervous bank account reality of a suburban house, every single living situation is a delicate, intricate balance of compromises.
There is absolutely no perfect home without a significant trade-off.
That is the truth.
That is the ultimate takeaway from analyzing their conversation. The true question isn't whether an apartment is objectively universally better than a house or vice versa. The question is, which specific configuration of compromises is better for you?
For you specifically.
Based strictly on your job demands, your financial budget, your personal tolerance for daily friction, and your personality type at this exact moment in your life. And it's vital to remember that your needs today will likely not be your needs in a decade. As you change, the walls you need around you will change too.
I love that perspective. And to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to mull over as you look around your own living room or your garden or your closet with a view today. If the walls of your current home could somehow talk, would they say that you are actively shaping your space, or would they say that your space is quietly shaping you?
A great question to end on.
Are you living in a place that accurately reflects who you are today? Or are you living in a place that reflects who you were when you eagerly signed that lease or nervously took out that 30-year mortgage? Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the world around you, keep examining the spaces you inhabit, and we will see you next time. Goodbye.
Goodbye, and thank you for listening. Okay, let's unpack this. You are joining us for a deep dive today that, at first glance, kind of masquerades as just a straightforward language lesson.
Right.
But we're looking at an audio transcript from the Learning English podcast, specifically an episode they titled Mastery of Domestic Discourse.
Yeah, and it's a great one.
It really is.
Yeah.
But the mission today, just so you know, isn't to hand you a simple vocabulary list and, send you on your way.
No, that would be a complete waste of your time.
Exactly, a total waste. Instead, we are dissecting the really high-level C2 grade language and these highly strategic debate tactics that the two hosts of that source material, Emma and John, use.
And they use them to navigate this incredibly universal, emotionally charged, and let's be honest, frankly infuriating human experience.
Choosing where to live.
Yes. Choosing where to live and then having to actually defend that choice to someone else.
Which is the hardest part.
Oh, absolutely.
So we are breaking down the ultimate toolkit for the domestic sphere today.
What's fascinating here is how Emma and John construct this whole linguistic framework, because they really do not rely on sterile dictionary definitions.
No, they don't just read from a textbook.
Right. They leverage their own highly relatable and intensely frustrating housing situations to really anchor advanced comprehension.
They use the pain.
They do. They take the raw, heavy, emotional weight of real estate, the quiet desperation of dealing with a negligent landlord.
Ugh, the worst.
The sheer financial terror of home maintenance.
Yep.
Or the creeping claustrophobia of city flats. And they use that emotional resonance to make complex linguistic concepts stick.
It's brilliant.
They are basically teaching you how to articulate survival in the modern housing market.
And that is the crucial point for you, the listener, because whether you are currently renting a tiny city flat where you can Literally touch the refrigerator from your bed.
We've all been there.
We really have. Or maybe you're sitting in this sprawling country house contemplating the sheer acreage of lawn you have to mow this weekend. The language you use to describe your living situation actually shapes your reality.
It absolutely does.
The words you choose dictate how you process your environment, and more importantly, how you advocate for your own comfort.
Because if you can't describe the problem, you can't fix it.
Exactly. So by the end of this deep dive, you will have the linguistic armor to articulate the exact nuances of what is wonderful or what is entirely broken about the place you sleep every night.
You'll be moving far beyond elementary descriptors. You won't just be saying something is good or bad or big or small.
Right. Achieving that level of C2 precision allows you to express the really multifaceted nature of domestic life.
And Emma and John begin this entire process by dropping their audience straight into a comprehension check.
Yeah, a pop quiz right at the start.
Right. It's a quiz based on a prior debate they had regarding the classic, seemingly unsolvable dilemma.
Houses versus apartments.
Exactly. And this isn't just a review exercise, it is a highly strategic framing device. Well, they're forcing the listener to recall the emotional arguments before they even introduce the advanced vocabulary needed to properly categorize them.
Oh, that makes sense. So let's look at the anatomy of that debate, because the way they set up their respective stances is really the foundation for all the advanced language that follows later in the transcript.
Right, the stances are everything.
So Emma is the champion of the apartment.
She is.
According to the first quiz question they review, her primary argument favored affordability and location.
The classic trade-offs.
Exactly. She makes the case that apartments are generally cheaper and situated closer to the city center, which obviously maximizes convenience.
It is the quintessential urbanist compromise.
Yeah, urbanist compromise.
You are literally trading square footage for access.
You deliberately lower your housing footprint to maximize your geographical advantage.
Yes. Putting yourself within walking distance of culture, commerce, transit.
But Emma's argument doesn't ignore the severe vulnerability of that choice.
Not at all.
The second quiz question highlights the critical flaw in this whole urbanist compromise, and it's a big one.
The landlord.
The landlord.
It always comes down to the landlord.
It does. Emma's major complaint, which she describes as the absolute low point of her apartment living experience, was this negligent landlord who just refused to fix the hot water in a timely manner.
The boiling water incident.
The boiling water incident. Emma recounts having to literally boil water on her stove for 5 days just to manage basic hygiene.
5 days.
5 days. Just consider the sheer indignity of that scenario.
It's awful.
You are paying a premium for this theoretical convenience in a modern city center.
Right.
Yet every morning you are reduced to the lifestyle of a 19th century pioneer.
Standing over a stove.
Waiting for a pot of water to heat up just so you can wash your face before going to your corporate job.
It completely shatters the illusion of the urban advantage.
It really does.
And the pedagogical choice to highlight that specific anecdote is incredibly deliberate on their part.
Why do you think that is?
Well, think about it. If Emma had simply stated, I experienced administrative friction with my property manager.
Boring.
Right. The listener would discard that information instantly. It's sterile.
Because it's stick.
But the visceral imagery of boiling water on a stove for nearly a week, that creates a permanent mental hook.
You don't forget that.
Exactly. It perfectly illustrates the inherent helplessness of the rental agreement. You are entirely at the mercy of another human being's timeline for your most basic infrastructure.
It's just waiting.
You're waiting for someone else to care.
And that helplessness is the exact counterpoint to John's stance in the debate.
Oh, absolutely.
Because John advocates for the house.
He does.
But he doesn't paint it as some pastoral fairy tale where everything is perfect.
No, he's very realistic about it.
His biggest complaint, which actually serves as the answer to the third quiz question, is the immense cost and relentless responsibility of maintenance.
He doesn't just call it hard work either.
No. He refers to his home maintenance as a second job.
A second job. And he pairs that description with just a brilliant piece of personification.
I love this part.
He states that this second job makes his bank account very, very nervous.
Yes.
And during the quiz, he even adds the caveat that his bank account is still nervous.
Still nervous.
Personifying a financial instrument in this way, giving a literal bank account the capacity for anxiety and dread, it's a highly sophisticated C2 level linguistic maneuver.
It is so painfully evocative.
It really is.
You can easily visualize this abstract concept of a bank account trembling in the corner of a room every time the floorboards creak.
Or the wind blows a little too hard against the roof.
Exactly. It takes the dry, numerical reality of home repair and translates it into this universal feeling of financial precariousness.
If we look at the underlying contrast Emma and John are asking you to weigh here, it is really stark.
Very stark.
On one side, you have the financial and locational convenience of the city, but you trade away your autonomy.
You surrender control.
You surrender control over your basic environment to a landlord. But on the other side, you achieve the total autonomy of home ownership, but it comes with a crushing structural and financial burden.
You possess ultimate control, but you pay for it with endless physical labor.
And perpetual financial anxiety.
It feels like adult life is merely the process of choosing which flavor of stress you find most tolerable.
That's a very good way to put it.
Do you prefer the stress of sending increasingly desperate emails to a property management company while you freeze in your own shower?
Or do you prefer the stress of owning the shower entirely, knowing that if the pipes burst, the resulting thousands of dollars in water damage are entirely your responsibility?
You're permanently trading one anxiety for another.
And Emma and John utilize that inherent tension as the springboard for their spatial vocabulary.
Moving from the debate into the actual semantics.
Exactly. Emma's apartment wasn't just functionally compromised by the lack of hot water. It suffered from severe physical limitations.
It was tiny.
Right. And they use those physical boundaries to teach the listener how to precisely categorize and describe space.
Specifically focusing on the dichotomy between cramped and spacious.
Let's examine how they handle cramped first.
Okay.
The quiz reveals that Emma described her apartment, and specifically her bedroom, using this exact word.
Cramped.
Now, an intermediate English learner might just think cramped means small.
Sure.
But the dialogue makes it incredibly clear that cramped carries a much heavier, much more uncomfortable connotation.
Because precision is the hallmark of C2 English.
Exactly. A jewelry box is small.
Right.
A compact car might be small.
Sure.
But cramped implies a restriction of movement.
It's bodily.
Yes. It suggests a space that is so inadequate for its intended purpose that it induces a physical sensation of being closed in.
It carries a mild, persistent undertone of claustrophobia.
You cannot easily stretch your arms.
You cannot navigate the space without contorting your body or having to shift furniture around just to open a door.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. To fully cement the definition of cramped in the listener's mind, John brings back a joke he made during their original debate.
Oh, this was ruthless.
It was. He didn't just agree that Emma's bedroom was cramped. He famously referred to it as a closet with a view.
A closet with a view.
And when he's reminded of this during the quiz, he firmly stands by the comment.
He doubles down.
He absolutely doubles down.
The linguistic mechanics of that insult are just superb.
They really are.
By utilizing dark humor, John exaggerates the lack of square footage to an absurd degree.
He's equating a bedroom to a utilitarian storage space.
Right. But the brilliance lies in the juxtaposition of the word closet with the phrase with a view.
It is a devastatingly funny cognitive dissonance.
You immediately picture a room so incredibly tiny that you practically have to step out into the hallway just to change your mind.
Yes.
And yet there is a window looking out at a sprawling, vibrant city skyline.
The contrast between the severe internal restriction and the massive external expanse perfectly encapsulates the irony of urban living.
You have the whole city at your fingertips, but you are living in a shoebox.
And that tension guarantees the learner will internalize the concept.
They won't forget cramped after that.
Never. Now, the natural antonym they provide, of course, is spacious.
Right.
Spacious is defined as having a generous amount of room.
And that is firmly attached to John's house in the country.
Exactly. Emma endures a cramped closet with a view. John enjoys a spacious house.
And they consolidate this entire real estate trajectory into one sample sentence, don't they?
They do. The sentence is, they wanted to move out of their cramped city flat into a more spacious house in the country.
That single sentence represents the demographic shift of millions of people navigating adulthood.
It's the ultimate millennial and Gen Z real estate arc right now.
It really is. But they don't restrict this spatial analysis just to the interior of the home.
No, they zoom out significantly.
They do. The conversation moves into the geographical nuances of where these homes are actually situated.
Which is a crucial area for advanced fluency.
Because the distinctions are incredibly subtle.
Very subtle.
They tackle the exact difference between the suburbs and the outskirts.
This is a great section.
I suspect a large portion of native speakers even use those terms interchangeably in casual conversation.
Oh, all the time.
But Emma and John make a hard distinction here.
They explicitly label it a subtle but important distinction in the transcript.
So how do they define the suburbs?
They define the suburbs as the residential areas encompassing and surrounding a city.
Okay.
The suburbs are fundamentally connected to the urban center.
They possess their own infrastructure.
Right. Schools, shopping centers, manicured lawns.
But they remain part of the broader metropolitan ecosystem.
Exactly. The outskirts, however, are defined as the absolute boundary line.
The edge.
It is the exact margin where the city permanently ends and borders the rural countryside.
I want you, the listener, to really visualize the physical geography of this concept.
It helps to picture it.
Imagine you decide to walk continuously away from a city center. You navigate through the dense, high-rise downtown.
Okay.
Eventually, the buildings shrink, and you are walking through the spreading suburbs. You're passing rows of identical houses,
Cul-de-sacs.
neighborhood parks, and you keep walking for miles.
Just keep going outward.
Finally, you reach a distinct threshold. You are standing on the pavement. You look over your left shoulder, and you see the very last streetlight,
The final row of municipal housing.
the last gas station connected to the city grid. That is the end of the urban world.
Right.
Then you look over your right shoulder, and the pavement turns to dirt.
There's nothing but open fields.
Dense tree lines.
Perhaps an isolated farm.
You are standing on the line, and that line is the outskirts.
It is the literal and psychological border. It is a liminal space.
Liminal, yes.
And understanding why Emma and John insist this is an important distinction comes down to the imagery it projects.
Because words project identity.
Precisely. If you tell a colleague you live in the suburbs, they immediately picture a predictable lifestyle,
A commute, a neighborhood association.
a certain level of domesticated predictability.
Right. But if you say you live on the outskirts,
You project a sense of existing on the fringe,
it implies isolation.
living on the very edge of the wilderness, completely detached from the communal safety net of the suburbs.
It's a completely different sociological identity.
Speaking of the wilderness, they actually follow this up with a highly relevant idiom.
Oh, yes. In the middle of nowhere.
In the middle of nowhere. They define this as a location that is extremely remote, entirely removed from towns, infrastructure, or people.
And John actually deployed this idiom during their debate, didn't he?
He did. It was when Emma showed him a photograph of a specific property she was looking at.
Right.
He took one look at the picture and dismissed it entirely, just declaring, that house is in the middle of nowhere.
He wasn't having it.
Not at all. And to contextualize that idiom for a modern listener, Emma and John offer a highly relatable example.
Losing your phone signal at a remote campsite.
Which is brilliant.
It perfectly updates the concept of nowhere for the 21st century.
Because historically, the middle of nowhere meant you were a 3-day horseback ride from medical care or a marketplace.
Right. But today, the immediate visceral indicator of being removed from civilization is looking down at your smartphone and seeing 0 bars of service.
The sudden severing of digital connection.
It perfectly encapsulates the modern feeling of absolute remoteness.
It really does.
So, we have dissected the physical constraints of space, whether a room is cramped or spacious, and we've mapped out the geographical nuances.
Whether a home sits in the suburbs, bounces on the outskirts, or is lost in the middle of nowhere.
But domestic discourse requires more than just maps and tape measures.
Much more.
A home carries a massive psychological and financial footprint.
And Emma and John transitioned the lesson right from the physical dimensions of space into the intense, highly consequential lexicon required to sustain that space.
The vocabulary here gets surprisingly heavy.
Very heavy. They introduce a set of advanced terms that capture the grinding realities of adulthood.
Let's examine the psychological side first.
Okay.
They highlight the word isolated.
Now, in a dictionary, isolated simply means feeling alone or separated from other people or places.
Very standard definition.
But look at how they deploy it. Emma uses it to describe a highly specific seasonal vulnerability.
She admits that she sometimes feels a bit isolated in the suburbs during winter.
Think about the emotional texture of that specific example.
It is entirely different from being physically in the middle of nowhere.
Because in the suburbs, you might be surrounded by hundreds of other houses.
You have neighbors 10 feet away.
Right. But during winter, the days are incredibly short.
It gets pitch black by 4:30 in the afternoon.
Temperature drops, and everyone retreats indoors.
You look out your window, and despite the density of the housing all around you, the streets are completely empty.
The vibrant, chaotic energy of the city center is miles away.
That suburban winter isolation is a profound psychological state of feeling lonely in a crowd.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, Emma and John are demonstrating the immense flexibility of C2 vocabulary here.
How so?
They pair Emma's highly personal, seasonal example with a massive, global example.
Ah, the lockdown reference.
Yes. They note in the transcript, during the lockdown, many people felt socially isolated.
They're showing the learner how to scale the word.
Exactly. You can use isolated to describe a quiet Tuesday night in a suburban living room.
Or you can use it to describe a historic, worldwide psychological phenomenon.
The word carries the necessary emotional gravity for both of those scenarios,
And from that emotional gravity, they pivot straight into the financial gravity.
which carries its own unique form of terror.
Truly. Let's look at the vocabulary of upkeep.
The first critical word they introduce is maintenance.
Now, we brushed past this earlier when discussing John's nervous bank account.
Right.
But here, they establish the formal definition. All the work and money explicitly required to keep a building in a good functioning condition.
But they don't just leave it at standard maintenance.
No, they introduce the crucial collocation, structural maintenance.
And the addition of the word structural completely changes the threat level of the concept.
Night and day difference.
Because maintenance might just mean cleaning the gutters
Repainting a scuffed hallway.
or replacing a washing machine.
Minor inconveniences.
Exactly. But structural maintenance strikes fear into the heart of any property owner.
Because it implies foundational jeopardy.
It means dealing with sinking foundations
Rotting, load-bearing walls.
or a failing roof.
It represents the mandatory, wildly expensive interventions required simply to prevent the building from collapsing.
It completely validates John's assertion that homeownership is a second job.
A stressful one. And if structural maintenance is the mandatory work to keep a house standing, they also introduce the vocabulary for optional suffering.
Optional suffering, I like that.
To renovate, and the noun renovation.
Right. They define this as the act of restoring or improving a building.
But again, they completely strip away the romanticized reality TV version of renovating.
They ground it in harsh reality with their sample sentence.
Quote, the kitchen renovation took 3 months, but it was worth it.
3 months.
3 months.
And they casually note that people will buy a house and immediately have to spend thousands upon thousands of dollars just to make it livable.
This is where their instructional design just shines.
Yes, they deliberately pair clinical, sterile vocabulary
Words like structural maintenance or renovation.
with intense, chaotic human experiences.
Because a 3-month kitchen renovation is not a sterile process.
It means 90 days of waking up to the sound of power tools,
Having strangers tramping through your living space.
finding construction dust inside your closed cabinets.
Eating microwave meals in your bedroom while watching your savings account drain.
By anchoring the clinical terms in these chaotic realities, Emma and John ensure the learner respects the true burden of the vocabulary.
You really feel the weight of it.
You do.
And nothing represents a burden quite like the final financial term they introduce.
The mortgage.
The mortgage.
Yeah.
The base definition they give is simple enough.
A long-term loan from a bank used to purchase property.
But Emma and John refuse to let it remain a simple financial term.
They emphasize the existential weight of it.
They describe securing a mortgage as making a huge commitment.
And they specifically highlight that these agreements often last for 30 years.
We really need to pause and analyze the sheer gravity of combining the word mortgage with the phrase 30-year commitment.
It is staggering.
You are making a legally binding promise to a massive financial institution that spans 3 decades.
Just consider the staggering amount of human volatility contained within a 30-year horizon.
Over 3 decades, your entire career trajectory might change multiple times.
You might marry, divorce.
Have children. Watch those children grow up and leave.
Your physical health will inevitably fluctuate.
The global economy will undoubtedly experience multiple recessions and booms.
Yet, through all of that unpredictable, unavoidable chaos, the mortgage remains.
It is an unyielding, constant financial obligation ticking away in the background of your life.
When they frame the mortgage as a 30-year commitment, they are moving far beyond a language lesson.
They are equipping you with the terminology to navigate the most monumental financial and emotional decisions you will likely ever make.
These aren't just vocabulary words.
No.
Structural maintenance, chaotic renovations, 30-year mortgages, these are the heavy milestones of adulthood.
But having this powerful vocabulary in your mental arsenal is only the first step.
Right, because the true test of fluency is knowing how to deploy it in a dynamic social interaction.
You have to actually use it.
You must know how to navigate the complex social dynamics of discussing these massive, emotionally charged topics with another human being.
A human being who might entirely disagree with you.
Exactly. Which leads us directly into the final and perhaps most crucial section of Emma and John's lesson.
The art of concession and active application.
Yes.
Because what good is knowing the exact definition of cramped or structural maintenance if you don't know how to wield those words in a live debate?
Emma and John highlight a very specific, highly strategic conversational phrase to manage this.
The phrase is, I'll give you that.
I'll give you that is basically a masterclass in the pragmatics of English discourse.
They explain its core function.
It is the phrase you deploy when you want to explicitly concede a point.
To formally acknowledge that a specific argument the other person made is valid and true.
Within the context of their own debate, John uses it when he finally concedes to Emma.
Right, because despite his hatred of apartments, he admits her flat does indeed boast a highly convenient location.
He says, okay, I'll give you that.
So what does this all mean for the learner? Why are they dedicating time to a phrase about giving up a point in a lesson that has been entirely about defending your housing choices?
The transcript notes that using this phrase shows you are actively listening.
You are remaining engaged in the debate.
Rather than just waiting for your turn to speak.
Which is what most people do in arguments.
Exactly. It demonstrates that true C2 level fluency is not about dominating a conversation.
It is about managing the psychological flow of an argument.
By teaching, I'll give you that, Emma and John are teaching the art of the strategic conversational retreat.
I love that phrase, strategic conversational retreat.
Because when you are in a heated debate about a highly emotional topic like housing, defenses are high.
Very high.
If you simply batter your opponent with counter-arguments, they stop listening.
They shut down.
But when you deploy, I'll give you that, you validate their perspective.
You make them feel heard and respected.
Which immediately lowers their defensive posture.
And ironically, makes your subsequent counterattack far more devastating.
It is the ultimate conversational pivot.
You look your opponent in the eye and say, your point about the city center having great restaurants is entirely valid, I'll give you that, but let's circle back to the fact that I had to boil water on a stove for 5 days.
You concede a minor geographical point to hammer home a massive lifestyle indignity.
It is incredibly effective.
And Emma and John don't just leave this as a theoretical concept either.
No, they force the audience to actively synthesize everything they've learned.
Through 2 final assignments.
Let's break those down. The pedagogical design of these final tasks reveals exactly how they intend for this knowledge to be internalized.
The first is a writing task.
Right. They ask their listeners to navigate to the comments section of the podcast.
Definitively declare their preference for either a house or an apartment.
Pick a side.
Pick a side and justify that choice using at least 3 or 4 of the newly acquired advanced words.
They explicitly suggest incorporating terms like spacious, maintenance, isolated, or renovate.
That writing task forces you to construct a personal reality using the new linguistic tool.
It gets it out of your head and onto the page.
But the speaking task is where the true challenge lies.
This one is intense.
They ask the listener to prepare a 1-minute debate speech, arguing for their vision of an ideal home.
You are instructed to imagine you are stepping directly into the debate alongside Emma and John.
You must utilize structural framing phrases.
Things like, the best thing is, or honestly.
And crucially, you are required to weave in that strategic concession phrase.
I'll give you that, but
To prove you can navigate the nuance of a counterargument.
it is a phenomenal synthesis exercise.
Because it demands that the learner take the heavy, emotionally laden vocabulary,
The terrifying structural maintenance,
the creeping suburban isolation,
the restrictive cramped spaces.
and interlock it with the structural debate tactics.
You cannot just list words.
You must build a compelling, multifaceted argument.
Imagine how a dedicated listener might actually execute that 1-minute speech.
It's fun to picture.
Picture stepping up to a microphone, looking directly at Emma and John, and delivering something like this.
Let's hear it.
Honestly, The best thing about a sprawling house on the outskirts of the city is the sheer spaciousness. I require that physical room to breathe away from the density of the urban grid. Now, John, you vividly described the crushing burden of structural maintenance and how your bank account is perpetually terrified by the prospect of a new roof. And okay, I'll give you that.
A perfect concession.
The financial reality is daunting, but I would infinitely rather face the chaos of a 3-month kitchen renovation and commit to a 30-year mortgage than ever be forced to boil water on a stove for 5 days straight while trapped in a cramped closet with a view.
That is fantastic. That hypothetical delivery perfectly demonstrates the objective of the entire lesson.
It seamlessly weaves together the visceral complaints,
The high-level spatial and financial vocabulary.
and the graceful strategic concession of, I'll give you that, but...
It proves a total command over the mechanics of domestic discourse.
We have covered an immense amount of linguistic and psychological territory today, based on Emma and John's conversation.
We really have.
Let's briefly retrace the path we've taken so you, the listener, have it all locked in.
We started by examining the raw, often humiliating realities of the renting versus owning debate.
Contrasting the profound indignity of boiling water for a shower against the unrelenting financial terror of a nervous bank account.
We explored how dark humor functions as a memory aid through the concept of a closet with a view.
Then we dissected the precise geographical boundaries that define our social identities.
Locating that exact liminal line that separates the predictability of the suburbs from the isolation of the outskirts.
We unpacked the heavy milestone vocabulary of adult domesticity.
The dread of structural maintenance.
The chaotic disruption of expensive renovations.
And the staggering 30-year existential commitment of a mortgage.
Finally, we analyzed the pragmatics of debate, learning how to gracefully concede a point to strategically strengthen our own arguments.
Emma and John have provided exactly what they promised. A high-level, C2 grade toolkit for navigating the domestic sphere.
And this knowledge goes far beyond passing a proficiency exam.
It's about real life.
The next time you are forced to write a massive check for rent,
Or the next time you find yourself staring at a leaky pipe in a house you technically own for the next 3 decades.
you now possess the precise, sophisticated mental framework to articulate exactly what you are experiencing,
You have the linguistic power to complain with eloquence.
to debate with strategy.
And to effectively advocate for the space you call home.
It's empowering.
This raises an important question, however.
Oh, I sense a philosophical pivot coming.
Just a small one.
What is the question?
Well, the overarching goal of their final speaking task was to have the student construct an argument defending their ideal home, utilizing this newly acquired vocabulary.
Right, the ideal home speech.
But if we look closely at the actual vocabulary Emma and John provided to build this argument,
Words themselves.
yes, words defined by restriction like cramped,
Words steeped in loneliness like isolated.
concepts built on dread like nervous bank accounts and relentless structural maintenance.
And the sheer temporal weight of a 30-year commitment.
We are forced to ask, is the very concept of an ideal home merely an illusion?
That is a deep question.
Can a truly ideal sanctuary actually exist when the fundamental language we must use to describe property, ownership, and tenancy is so deeply and inherently rooted in financial burden, physical compromise, and emotional isolation?
Wow.
The vocabulary itself suggests that every home, regardless of how spacious or conveniently located it might be, is ultimately just an architecture of compromise.
That had a staggering thought to end on.
It frames everything we discussed in a new light.
Are we truly just utilizing high-level English to argue over which specific set of burdens we find most aesthetically pleasing?
Is the ideal home simply the environment where the inherent stress of existing is the most tolerable?
That is a brilliantly provocative concept for you to mull over the next time you walk through your front door.
I hope it gives everyone something to think about.
I want to warmly thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been great.
It has been an absolute privilege unpacking the hidden depths of this conversation with you. Keep questioning the language you use every day. Keep exploring the hidden weight of your vocabulary, and we will catch you on the next one.